Thank you for tuning into the Buyer's Guide podcast, where we talk all things property and finance. My name is Peter Mastriani, the founder of the Buyer's Guide, and in today's cast I'm going to discuss rentvesting. Now, the term rentvestor has really come into vogue in the past 12 to 18 months. However, it's a strategy that I personally have an affinity with, as it was the approach that allowed me to get my start within property investing. So, today, we're going to discuss the who, what, when, why, and how to rentvesting. So, let's get to it. Who, what, when, why, and how is the right order for the saying, but to explain the rentvesting strategy, I think it's probably better off if we start off with the what. So what is rentvesting? Well, rentvesting isn't exactly a new strategy. I was doing it more than 10 years ago, as were many others. However, as property continues to become more and more expensive in our capital cities, it's really emerging as quite an important property trend across Australia. And the reason for that is because it actually allows more individuals to break into the property market without actually having to significantly compromise on their lifestyles. I guess put simply, rentvesting is purchasing an investment rather than living in the property yourself. So what you would do is buy an investment, perhaps within an affordable area, while actually renting in your preferred location. And that in itself brings a lot of benefits. And that is, of course, if it actually suits your inclination and your budget and your lifestyle requirements. But look, if you were to buy into a middle or an outer ring suburb, it has the potential to actually produce quite a strong rental yield. And depending on your financial situation, it could actually cover the bulk of your mortgage repayments and the actual associated property expenses. In some cases, it could actually even be positively geared, making you money on a week-to-week basis. But look, in either scenario, it equates in most instances to just a little bit of out-of-pocket expense on a month-to-month basis. And a little bit of out-of-pocket expense for most people can actually mean that it'll have little impact on your financial situation, which means that it's a great starting point into the property market. Now, from here, there are many options, and the options are quite varied. However, importantly, it means that through rentvesting, you're in the market. And when you're in, it starts to become a lot easier to start commencing and executing other strategies to either acquire your dream home or that family home or other investments. One situation, let's say hypothetically, could be that you could perhaps choose to pile in additional funds into the property and start paying down that debt or that mortgage. Another option could be that future capital gains in that property can be used to leverage into another investment property. In my case, I choose a set and forget type scenario where the properties are largely looking after themselves and I view them as part of my retirement plan. Now, I'm only in my early 30s, but I'm pretty sure that it's going to pay pretty good dividends the longer I actually hold these assets. Another option for you may be to choose to sell the asset in the future and use the funds for something else. Importantly, though, I really need to highlight that in any of these scenarios, there's going to be different taxation, entry, and exiting costs, along with a number of different other factors that need to be taken into account. Therefore, it's really, really important to seek the right professional advice before choosing whether or not rentvesting is going to be the right strategy for you. In the end, though, look, there's definitely lots of pros and lots of cons to the rentvesting strategy. But look, I think it's important that you need to consider your own financial circumstances before you decide which way or which path you're going to choose to go down. So let's look at the who. Who could actually utilize rentvesting as a strategy, and when can it actually be done? While most people think that rent money is dead money, the concepts can be a better financial move than you may think. So depending on your financial and your personal situation, it could well be a viable option to consider. And a lot of people are actually doing it. I found some domain research, and look, it actually shows that the average age at which Gen Yers buy their first investment property is 25 years old. And that's compared to 35 years of age for Gen Xers and 45 years for the baby boomers. Now, another important factor is that these Gen Yers, myself included, and many others, are actually building larger investment portfolios than their predecessors, who typically aimed to own their own home outright, and then maybe one investment. So the actual opposite is taking place. The argument here is that I guess us younger folk maybe have more of an incentive, or perhaps maybe even more aspirational than other generations. Because if we want to retire early, we've got a couple of options. One of which is to invent a new super duper app that no one's ever heard of as of yet, and it goes on to sell billions. Or you could start off by acquiring some small assets, build them over time, and then ultimately live off them. Because the domain research shows that 16% of Gen Yers already own 2 or more properties, compared to only 17% of Gen Xers and the baby boomers. So, to move on, look, maybe the best way to determine who it's suitable for is by looking at the pros and the cons. That way you can evaluate yourself whether or not it's going to be right for you. So let's look at the pros. Firstly, you get to live where you want. If you're renting, then it's a major benefit to you is being able to choose where you want to live and for how long you would like to live there. Another pro is that it could actually be a better home. Location aside, the actual physical dwelling could be superior. It's probably not unreasonable to expect that you could live in $1 million home in a close proximity to the beach or to vibrant nightlife areas or in the inner city, and still be able to afford the weekly rent. Whereas you could use $300,000, $400,000 and buy in an outer ring of an area and only have a minimal weekly out-of-pocket expense to cover that debt whilst you're renting. Another factor as a pro is that I guess you get the ability to work your budget. And I say that because mortgage repayments are one of the biggest financial strains on the household accounting budget. So while you can slowly pay down that balance over the years, it takes maybe 10 or 12 years before you actually start to really chip into that overall figure. If you're renting though, look, you can adjust your budget accordingly. If you're paying $600 a week and your circumstances change, or you change career directions and you can't afford that level of rent, well, it's the option is there for you to perhaps find a rental option that may cost $350 or $400 a week. I guess what I'm trying to get at here is rentvesting gives you flexibility. It's really the key. And if you're open to change and perhaps a little bit of adventure along the way, then sometimes renting is really a bit of a no-brainer. A big benefit of rentvesting is tax deductions. Very simply, repayments on your principal place of residence can't be deducted. On the other hand, on your investment property, interest repayments from the investment property are fully tax deductible, along with any number of expenses that are actually associated with maintaining that property, be that rates, water, insurance, general upkeep costs, all can become fully tax deductible. Again, this is perhaps open to change if there is a change of government in the federal election, although it will be still very much so relevant for new property purchases. Another good pro is that you could have a greater profit potential. In that perhaps you may love the suburb that you live in, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's an investment grade location or that it's actually an investment grade property that you're living in. So by doing thorough research and perhaps removing the emotional attachment that you have to your home, you could be far better off in terms of capital growth potential. That is, of course, if you purchase correctly. And another big factor there is that you could limit the actual entry and exit costs of purchasing and selling that principal place of residence, as you don't have to keep on forking out stamp duty and legals and real estate selling costs and in any other number of factors that are associated with it. Now the cons. I think that the biggest disadvantage of rent vesting is that home is where the heart is, and sometimes being in a transient situation, you don't actually get to establish your roots. And I say that because I look at my own experience, and for a period of time there, I was moving every 6 to 12 months, and there were various reasons behind that. Leases were coming to an end. I moved out of different house share arrangements. I was in relationships which ended, which meant that we had to both move, or I had to move, or any number of reasons. So I guess it's you could view it as that it's always temporary, and that unfortunately you don't get to have a say in making a lot of changes into the actual look and feel of a rental property. There sometimes can be less choice, particularly in high demand rental areas. And another big disadvantage is that you've actually got to move in itself. You've got to pack, you've got to unpack, you've got to do it all over again. So there's some annoyances that can be associated with it. But, whether or not it can be done, I guess, is largely down to you. It's quite possible, though, that if you've been saving for a deposit for a house, you could probably use it in a more affordable investment grade area, in an investment grade property as well, and perhaps look at starting your property adventure sooner. Otherwise, to what you may have thought in the past. However, timing is just like everything else. It really just depends. It depends on you and at what stage you're personally in and what your motivations are to actually pursue this strategy. So why would you do it? Well, looking at your why, as a lot of people know, Simon Sinek has popularized the term through his TEDx talk, which is one of the most viewed of all time now, which is about finding your why. So why may you want to do this? Well, I guess the key draw card and the reason why most individuals pursue this as a strategy is because they don't have to significantly sacrifice their lifestyle, and you can work towards buying that family or that dream home later on. You get to live where you like to live now, be that in the city or the beach or that vibrant nightlife area that we just talked about. Well, using investment property as an asset vehicle to actually grow your wealth. Now, in some cases, actually buying several cheaper investment grade properties can actually be a way to build wealth far quicker than buying just one expensive home. Now, buying an investment first also can remove a lot of the emotion that's actually associated with purchasing a home, because the focus or your attention is probably going to gravitate towards more around affordability and the actual value of the property as an actual investment. The thinking, I guess, becomes different as your investment targets now start to become more aligned to finding an investment grade property in an investment grade location. Ultimately, why you would want to do this decision or to make this decision, I should say, you need to consider several other factors. The first of which is, can you actually really afford to do this? And I say that because just because it's cheaper for you to buy this property, and in some cases, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can actually afford it. So you really need to do thorough research, one, into your own financial situation, and you need to do thorough research into what an investment grade property and investment grade location actually looks like. So research into determining which areas are going to be suitable based on lower prices but good solid rental yields that also have a good likelihood of increasing in value over time is really what you need to focus your attention on. And I guess it's the wise investor that takes the time to actually do the thorough research and also seek professional advice from others, which leads me to my final point, in that you should talk to your financial advisor, you should talk to an accountant, you should talk to a mortgage broker, as you really need to develop a solid understanding of how much you're going to need to save and what impact this investment could actually have on your overall financial situation. So lastly, and to finish up the podcast, the how. How do you do this? Well, firstly, I think it's important that you start off by speaking with others to perhaps put an acid test on whether or not this scenario is going to be right for you. So I'm personally offering free consultations with anyone that is listening to this podcast on Rentvesting, so we can work with you to really help formulate a possible new way forward. Now, you can take advantage of these free consultations by getting in contact with me and booking that consultation, which can be done through www.thebuyersguide.com.au. And I can walk you through a possible scenario or two, and we can make an assessment of how suitable that would be for you. Importantly, I really encourage you to start educating yourself. The more you can digest from a variety of different sources, the better. You need to view investing and this strategy as really a launch pad, because if you get the first one right, it's really going to set you off on an incredible pathway forward. By itself, renting can be a futile exercise, or it can be viewed as an effective investment strategy. So on that note, that concludes another episode of the Buyer's Guide podcast. Rentvesting, I believe, is a fantastic example of how the Australian property market is actually evolving, as it needs to, because property values in some areas are continuing to rise and rise and rise, and these lifestyle areas are really becoming unaffordable, particularly if you're just starting out. So if you feel that this strategy could be for you, I really would encourage you to get in contact for a free consultation, and by booking it through www.thebuyersguide.com.au, where you can register your details and we'll be in touch. Now, if you're a little bit shy, or the timing may be a little off when you first listen to this podcast, that's completely fine, because stay tuned for further announcements, because in the coming months, the Buyer's Guide will be launching the website www.rentvesting.com.au, which will become the ultimate destination for all budding rentvestors alike. So that concludes another episode of the Buyer's Guide podcast. Stay tuned, because we do have an awesome lineup of future guests coming onto the show. But until next time, bye-bye.